Welcome to the Daily Plunge. We're in the book of Genesis, chapter 1, starting at verse 6, going through chapter 2, verse 3. Genesis these first few chapters are not about details, it's about the big picture. And it's not so much, Genesis is not a textbook about the details of what happened, but about why. And the big point of this is that God created, and he said that he preaches that it's all good. And therefore, the first chapter of Genesis is all about gospel, God's blessing. In fact, God creates creation, and he creates human beings to bestow upon them his blessing. And when he creates, one of the things we know is that creation is not an extension of God, an appendage of God. It's separate. And all the things that God creates are not little gods. They are creations. They are creatures. And he creates diversity. It's not just one or two styles, or all kinds of a myriad of different species and types, right? So there's the creativity that we have in our lives is simply mocking the creativity that comes from God. Creativity is a divine nature. And that brings us to the next thing where God says, let us create man in our image. Well, we don't look like God physically. What is the nature of who God is? Creativity, being connected with one another, having community, the sense of eternity. I mean, these characteristics of God are sewed into us, right? Imprinted upon us. And one of the things is that the Trinity is hidden in Genesis, but we know that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are there, but they're hidden in the text. The relationship between man and God is not one of equals, nor is it one of autonomy. Man is dependent upon God for the blessings of life and sustenance, and man is accountable to God. As he creates man in his image, he's not another God, though. And one of the things is that as we are created in the image of the character of God, women and men are created together to be helpmates to one another. He speaks about dominion over nature, and this is not about dominance, right? It's that we have a God-given authority to utilize nature to bless our lives, chop down trees, build buildings, domesticate animals, etc. But we also have a responsibility. God has dominion over all of creation, and that is a stewardship that God has to sustain it. And so we reflect God's nature and that we have dominion, but again, God's type of dominion. And then he speaks about the Sabbath, that God rested. And God did not create another heaven and earth. He was done. And one of the things about this whole chapter is that for God, there's no earlier or later, swifter or slower, as Luther says, but in his eyes, in God's eyes, because he's out beyond time, everything is present. And after he creates man and he rests, you think about it, that our first day as human beings is the Sabbath, where God rests from his work. We can only work out of our rest. And so we require this Sabbath rest. But more than that, God has sanctified this day, set it aside for sacred purposes, for the worship of God. And in the seventh day, God wanted human beings to busy themselves with both his word and with worship that are established by him, and to acknowledge God and to be grateful to God for all that he does and creates in us. Well, hey, thanks, friends. Take time to like, share, and subscribe so that you get to see this regularly and you can share it with others. Have a blessed day.